I'm going to order this hearing. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chairman of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Monday, March 15th, 2021. It's the Ides of March, and the time is 3:06 in the afternoon, and we are conducting this hearing virtually. It is available to the public over the Zoom video conference platform. It is also being streamed live on the committee's website, which is www.chairmanmendelson.com/live. Again, Chairman Mendelson, that's one word, .com/live. The hearing will be available on the council's website and cable TV within a few days after it is uploaded. The subject of today's hearing is a continuation of our performance oversight hearings. This is the fourth hearing that we are having. On Wednesday, we will have the fifth regarding Commission on Arts and Humanities and University of the District of Columbia. On Thursday, we'll have our final oversight hearing, which is Office of Zoning, Office of Planning, and DCRA. But today is on regional agencies that, to the extent that there's purview, are under the purview of the Committee as a whole, beginning with the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, and then the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Commission. We have, we have a public witness for the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, and then the executive director. We've been joined by one council member, Councilmember Janice Lewis George. While Mr. Cash is letting in, while he's letting in the executive director, Councilmember, do you have any opening remarks?
Yes, I do.
Please.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Mendelson, for holding today's hearing. Transportation, from a regional perspective, is one of the most important aspects of government work. It's also one of the topics that I hear from constituents most often. And transportation equity is so important to me, particularly in Ward 4, where our residents use a range of transportation options. We want our transportation to be safe, affordable, environmentally friendly, and most importantly, we must be sure that individuals can reasonably and reliably get where they need to go. So when I'm considering the work of WMATA, I'm first and foremost considering whether our working families can get to their jobs and childcare. I'm considering whether our seniors can get to their medical appointments and grocery stores. I'm considering whether there's true accessibility for our residents with disabilities. This is why the proposed WMATA cuts were so alarming to me and my constituents. Ward 4 counts on our Metro bus lines to get to our jobs, our children's caregiving, our appointments, our shops. When lines are cut, residents can feel truly stranded. And this worsens inequity and can force residents out of otherwise livable and affordable areas. I'm relieved to see that the federal funding has allowed WMATA to pursue a revised budget proposal. And so I'm here today to find out more about what we should expect to see in the revised budget and to better understand how the authority has been innovating this past year and is planning to recover from the impact of the pandemic with the scale and equity in mind. Here in Ward 4, the WMATA bus barn at 14th Street remains a topic on the minds of all of our constituents as they want to make sure that that bus barn will be open with an electrical bus fleet. And as the district meets its clean energy goals, looks to meet our clean energy goals, that has to be on top of mind. And so I hope to hear from WMATA about their plans to bring a energy efficient electrical bus barn to Ward 4 and look forward to hearing how there will not be any cuts to our bus lines that our Ward 4 constituents rely on. Thank you so much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember. With that, let me see. I noted that we had a public witness, but he has not shown up. So we'll begin with Chuck Bean, who's the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. Good afternoon, Mr. Bean.
Good afternoon.
Let's see.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Council Member Louis George. Glad to address the two of you and the other members of the council and council staff. I think the moderator is also going to be allowing Conti Srikanth to join me as a speaker today to discuss the role of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, known alternatively as the Council of Governments or as COG, in moving the region forward during the last year and our goals for the upcoming year. As you know, COG's membership is made up of the region's local and state elected officials and members of the area's congressional delegation. These members serve on a network of boards, policy committees, and partnerships. COG has three major boards, the COG Board of Directors, also the National Capital Region Transportation Planning Board, or TPB, and the Metropolitan Washington Air Quality Committee, known as MWAC. Under the COG Board's direction, we've created a number of policy and advisory committees. These include the Climate, Energy, and Environment Policy Committee, Chesapeake Bay and Water Resources Policy Committee, Human Services Policy Committee, and the Region Forward Coalition. These serve as think tanks and advisory committees for the boards. COG also supports public and private partnership groups, including Clean Air Partners and the Anacostia Watershed Partnership. We convene many professional and technical committees of local officials, such as the CAOs, the city and county managers of the region, police chiefs, fire chiefs, chief information officers, planning directors every month, housing directors every month, and the newly organized Chief Equity Officers Committee for the region. COG continues to benefit from the active involvement of and leadership of the officials from the District of Columbia. Appreciate Chairman Mendelson for his continued leadership on the COG board, and Council Member Robert White for chairing the COG Board of Directors this year, and Council Member Allen as chair of the Transportation Planning Board. So I want to thank Council Members Mons, Che, Henderson, Louis George, Nadeau, and Pinto for their great work on our policy committees. I'll outline two priorities for the coming year and turn the podium to Conti to hit a couple, and then I will conclude. So the first priority is the one in front of us right now, supporting the region's response and recovery to the COVID-19 pandemic. Addressing the immediate needs to combat the pandemic continues to be our top priority. COG has been working to connect and support area officials in the efforts to prepare for and respond to the current COVID pandemic by sharing best practices, research, data, and messaging. This network includes elected officials on these boards, city and county managers, the Health Officials Committee, Emergency Managers Committee, public information officers, food security leaders, as well as private and nonprofit sector partners. COG is supporting regional vaccine distribution through the ongoing coordination of area health officials, regional messaging, and a webinar series on vaccine distribution. COG staff under Conti's leadership have tracked the regional impacts of COVID-19, particularly the effects on the transportation system, economy, environment, and health. These analyses will help the region understand the magnitude of the challenges faced and what it will take to get back on to a path to a more equitable and resilient region. Another priority is advancing racial equity for all residents throughout the region. Racial equity is a fundamental COG value, which has been affirmed by the COG Board of Directors in a resolution in July 2020. The board affirms that our work together will be anti-racist, will advance equity, and that equity will be woven into COG's Region Forward vision to assure a more prosperous, accessible, livable, and sustainable, equitable future for all area residents and throughout COG's analyses, operations, procurement, programs, and priorities. This year, COG established the Chief Equity Officers Committee, comprised of the Chief Equity Officer or Equity Lead from each member jurisdiction to serve as the hub for advancing racial equity initiatives throughout the region, within COG's member local governments and through COG's work. COG will continue to support the committee and our member jurisdictions in advancing racial equity within their local government policies and practices. Brian McClure from the district is a vice chair of this new committee. COG analyzes tract-level census data to identify equity emphasis areas of communities with disproportionately high concentrations of low-income and/or minority populations in the region. The data is used in transportation planning to identify and evaluate whether planned projects will disproportionately impact communities of color, including the accessibility and mobility impact for each area. The Health Officials Committee will continue to focus on addressing health inequities, especially those perpetrated by structural racism and further demonstrated by the current COVID-19 pandemic. COG is currently developing a fair housing analysis for the region to develop solutions to ensure greater housing equity. And COG's Homeless Services Committee is embarking on a racial equity and systems analysis of continuums of care in the region. This year, COG will further advance this priority by conducting an internal organizational racial equity audit and training for all COG staff. Now I'd like to pass the baton to Kanti Srikanth. Kanti is our Deputy Executive Director for Metropolitan Planning to share additional priorities for the year. Following his remarks, I will close this out. Mr. Srikanth.
Mr. Srikanth, if you're speaking, you're muted. It's you, so your video is not on.
I think got a text from Mr. Srikanth that he's having connection problems at his end, so I will cover the next two priorities. Kanti, oh, there's Kanti. Kanti, give me a signal if you're ready to proceed or if you'd like me to go forward. Kanti, I'm going to continue with the third priority and the fourth priority unless you signal me otherwise. All right. So COG's third priority, and this is under the direction of Mr. Srikanth, we'd like to share is about growth and climate change mitigation. COG is focused on helping plan for the future growth of people and jobs in the region and its relationship to environmental protection. According to COG's cooperative forecasts, 1.6 million new people and 1.1 million new jobs are expected in the region by 2045. Much of this growth will occur in the district. The district will continue to have the largest number of jobs of any jurisdiction. In the metropolitan region, there are 141 activity centers, 25 of which are in the district. And these activity centers are part of the solution to managing this growth and helping accommodate by concentrating employment, transit, and mixed-use development in communities. Special focus regarding growth for COG will continue to be implications for environmental quality and addressing climate change. COG staff will continue to work towards the shared climate goals outlined in the Metropolitan Washington 2030 Climate and Energy Action Plan. The plan includes a new greenhouse gas emissions reduction goal, which is a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions below baseline levels, 2005 emission levels, by 2030. Recognized as the only region in the United States to have developed climate mitigation and resilience plan as per the global best practices for climate change planning, COG will work the Global Covenant of Mayors for climate and energy to learn from other global leaders with the long-term goal of reducing emissions by 80% by 2050. COG will continue following the work of the Transportation and Climate Initiative, or TCI, which is a multi-state collaboration throughout the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast states, including Maryland and Virginia and the District of Columbia, working to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector. COG has long been a leader in coordinating regional policy for protection of the Anacostia watershed, Potomac River, and the Chesapeake Bay. Area wastewater treatment plants, including the Blue Plains Advanced Wastewater Treatment Plant in the district, now achieve some of the highest standards anywhere in the United States. Managing stormwater runoff remains an expensive challenge. The District of Columbia is among the region's leaders with its Clean Rivers Project, stormwater credit trading program, and green infrastructure solutions. The region must maintain water supply infrastructure to meet future growth. COG is working closely with DC Water and other utilities to meet this need. The fourth priority for COG is addressing the region's housing needs by connecting land use and transportation in high-capacity transit station areas. In September 2019, the COG board concluded a year-long effort with local planning and housing directors to address the region's housing needs by addressing regional housing targets. The targets set goals for the amount of housing needed within the region, the location of new housing around high capacity transit, and the cost bands of the additional households. When achieved, the targets are expected to address the region's housing needs from an economic competitiveness and transportation infrastructure standpoint by improving affordability and bringing housing and jobs closer together. To build on the success of this goal and milestone, efforts to realize the above targets will be necessary at local, regional, and state levels, and we'll have to focus on many aspects of the community development. COG will continue to focus on connecting land use and transportation high-capacity transit station areas to optimize the region's complex land use and transportation system in a manner that will favorably address traffic congestion and support increased accessibility throughout the region. The discussion, happy to discuss the 225 high-capacity transit station areas or nodes in the region that we project by 2030. The fifth final priority to share today is continued transportation planning through Visualize 2045. COG through the TPB, which is the Metropolitan Region's Metropolitan Planning Organization, is staffing the implementation of Visualize 2045, which includes the region's transportation plans through that year to help decision makers and the public visualize and prepare for the region's transportation future. Visualize 2045 is a new kind of long-range transportation plan for the region. It shows the projects and other improvements the region's transportation agencies expect to be able to afford between now and 2045, as well as those they aspire if they had more resources. The plan focuses on regionally significant road and transit projects, but also highlights bicycle and pedestrian projects and key land use issues facing the region. There are three main elements to the plan: the federal requirements, what the region must do, the financially constrained element, and what the region can do, and the 7 aspirational initiatives, what the region aspires to do. Final section of the briefing today is benefit to the District of Columbia and being a member of COG. In support of these programs and goals, every month, over 1,500 officials and experts organized through COG to share best practices and promote regional coordination. There's no other place in the region like COG for this level of coordination. Elected officials, senior member jurisdiction staff, planners convene at COG to tackle issues that affect the district and our region as a whole. COG membership provides access to our 135 in-house experts, our staff, on a range of technical fields in transportation, the environment, land use, housing, public safety, and more. COG expertise saves members money through research, consultants, regional analysis, and publications. And being a member ensures that the district's point of view is heard and your leadership is at the table. Well, I've touched on several programs at COG. I wanted to share a few more to shape more livable and prosperous communities, which is a key focus of the Region Forward Vision. The Council of Governments promotes regional cooperation on planning, the economy, and housing options for all our residents. COG's Cooperative Forecasting Program provides regularly updated population, household, and employment forecasts for use in planning and modeling activities at COG, the Transportation Planning Board, and other state, regional, and local agencies. Additionally, the COG Cooperative Purchasing Program reduces costs through economies of scale created through volume buying for our members by taking advantage of the combined purchasing power of participating jurisdictions. Volume buying saves jurisdictions and their taxpayers money. The program also promotes sharing information among area purchasing officials and encourages continuing education for procurement officials throughout the region. Through COG's Chief Purchasing Officers Committee, participating agencies, school boards, semi-autonomous government authorities and commissions cooperatively bid on more than 20 specific purchases, resulting in larger volume and better unit pricing. The District of Columbia is currently saving money participating in 4 contracts for road salt, ice melt, self-contained breathing apparatuses, and health and wellness program services. Members also have the opportunity to use the COG rider clause to join thousands of existing contracts and avoid the need to do in-house building. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, council members, for the opportunity to summarize the work of COG for the District of Columbia and the region as a whole. The district's participation in COG and as a leader in our region is a vital part of the ongoing work within our communities, and the reason the Metropolitan Washington region is one of the best places to live, work, and play. Now, assuming Mr. Srikanth has availed himself of a good connection, he and I will be happy to answer questions. Otherwise, I'll be happy to answer questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Bean. And Mr. Srikanth looks like he might be frozen. So I have a few questions for you. Thank you for your testimony. Can you give me some status update on where things are with the Blue Plains intermunicipal agreement? There's been talk of re-examining the agreement. Is that correct? And do you know where things are?
I do not have updated information on that, but would be happy to follow up with your staff with verbal or written briefing. I know that there's continued discussion amongst the utilities that participate with DC Water on Blue Plains.
Would COG necessarily be involved in that if there was discussion, if it was reopened?
Yes, COG has served as a facilitator of those discussions, as impartial, particularly on two aspects. One, I would characterize as scientific, and the measurement of use of Blue Plains by the jurisdictions, and also some of the legal aspects. It was just a few years ago that we facilitated agreement of the intermunicipal agreement for Blue Plains, and that was a 99-year agreement, but that's of course could be opened by participating jurisdictions.
Let me shift to what work is COG currently undertaking or looking at in the future to address the impact of COVID on the region, particularly with regard to transportation and office space. Transportation, I believe right now is something like 20% below where it was a year ago, or pre-pandemic, I should say. And in my mind, there's a big question about what the impact is going to be on office space. Is COG doing anything with that yet?
Yes, we're rolling out a series of research pieces that we will be analyzing the impact of the pandemic and gleaning insights for reopening, which I would characterize as the short term, and then what the new normal might be. So we had a presentation before the COG Board of Directors just last week, which is focused on economic impacts. Through TPB, Conti and team have presented results of region-wide surveys about choice and preferences, and we're looking to glean what trends that have emerged in the middle of the pandemic might be longstanding. So telework and transit are probably the key to both of those. So we can happy to send council members the research that we have done and the research that is forthcoming. I'd venture to say that when we look at transit, often the focus is on return to Metro Rail, and that is important, and whatever we can do to get behind that. But the focus on bus and ridership on bus as the bus system has been essential to getting employees without other options, but that do have in-person jobs, in-person positions. So I think the impact, the importance of the bus has been dramatized through the pandemic, and the return to transit, return to rail, I think is something that we're all going to need to be focusing on in the next 3 to 12 months.
Yeah, you offered to share some of the studies. Have they been shared with the board members?
Yes, shared either through COG or through TPB.
Okay. Let me see. My guess is that it's too early to know where we're going to end up with office space.
Yeah, this is the planning directors through COG. It would be one of the key groups that would be analyzing this during the year. And they have set a learning agenda, if you will, for their monthly meetings throughout the year. And what I hear from these professionals is two theories. One is due to increase in telework, we're going to need less office space. The counter theory is due to the space requirements needed in the new office, we'd actually need more office space. I think the consensus would be stronger with the first theory, and my personal opinion is that the reuse of commercial office space for multi-family housing might be an important trend in the next year or two.
Okay.
But you know, we've consulted some of the economic development directors, and I think the trends that they're seeing is that the larger firms are continuing their footprint. Smaller firms that have leases coming up would be the most likely to not renew or do something different. So as we look at the analysis of commercial real estate, those would be a couple of factors to look at in 2021.
I'm going to shift the subject again. In your opinion, is there anything that council or the district government could be doing to better assist with COG's mission and top priorities?
Well, arguably the two top entities within COG are the COG Board of Directors, and it's chaired by Councilmember White, and TBB chaired by Councilmember Allen. So we're realizing full and top engagement. Haven't talked as much about public safety in the briefing here, but we're only 10 weeks from the insurrection at the Capitol. So I want to say we appreciate the partnership with DCHCMA through our Homeland Security Executive Committee, through our emergency managers, through MPD, through our police officers. So Mr. Chairman, we're seeing strong engagement both at the elected official level as well as the our dozens of technical committee levels.
Let me ask you two other questions in my 2 minutes. You mentioned that there are 20 different purchases to the cooperative purchasing program. And when I say 20 purchases, I mean of 20 different items or commodities, whatever. The district is only participating with regard to 4. Is there an easy explanation for why the district is only participating in 20% of the purchases?
I think provide some context there. There's 2 opportunities for the district to save money, and one is through the COG rider clause, which I do not spend a lot of time on, but the entity that will follow me, WMATA, participates in that, providing opportunity for jurisdictions to participate in the diesel and gas contract. So the district participates in many contracts through the COG rider clause. The contracts that I was talking about with the 20 or so are relatively newer initiative for the council of governments, and that is initiating from the front end a consortium purchase of contracts. So I would say that the district, whether it's DCHCMA, fire chiefs, information technology specialists are very active in developing these consortium purchases.
So if I read into it a lack of participation, I'm misreading it.
Yes, sir. I would say that I'm very satisfied with the district's participation in both the COG rider clause as well as the consortium purchases.
As my time is evaporating, the council last fall adopted legislation calling for an amendment to the Metro Compact with regard to a police complaint commission. I never really worked with COG. Is that something that COG would be willing to help us to coordinate with Maryland and Virginia?
Yes, I'm aware that this was advanced in the Maryland General Assembly with delegates from our metro region. It was not advanced in time for the Virginia General Assembly of this year, but we would be happy to coordinate as these any discussion of a compact, very detailed, must be essentially identical as it moves through those chambers.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if I may mention one other thing, or save it for a few minutes from now.
Why don't you save it for a couple minutes? Let me turn to my colleague, Councilmember Lewis George.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Bean. I was hoping to ask a few questions just about green transportation. I'm interested in hearing more about plans to increase electric bus fleets in the region and support individuals who want to purchase electric vehicles. Has COG made recommendations or supported regional transit providers in moving toward electric buses? I hope to hear more from WMATA about their zero emission bus planning. Is this something that COG has advised on? And do you have a recommendation about how best and how quickly WMATA could move to a fully electric bus fleet?
Thank you, Council Member. The expert on this is the person who's working with his Zoom freeze right now, but
okay.
Mr. Srikanth will follow up. I would say that electrification is emerging as a major priority for the Council of Governments. And I think it's a two-part. One is acquisition by agencies, whether it's the federal government or local jurisdictions, or acquisition by the public and the infrastructure that's needed for the public. Starting with the latter, we have a cooperative purchasing program for electric vehicles, and we would be happy to send that information to you. When we think about moving from the public to agencies, purchasing, having the negotiating power to purchasing at scale is something that we would be very happy to get behind. So happy to connect the dots between various transit agencies. I think Mr. Srikanth, as his title is Executive Director of Metropolitan Planning, he's at the intersection of our climate goals as well as our transportation goals. So I think equipping of the electric fleet, as President Biden has highlighted for the federal government, and facilitating purchases by member jurisdictions. Besides the district at over 700,000 people, Fairfax, Montgomery, Prince George's are all bigger than half dozen states. So there's a lot of purchasing power there. If just two jurisdictions initiate a contract, that's a lot of buying power. So we'll follow up with the details, but I would summarize as yes and yes.
Awesome. Would you, as a result, would you all advise against, I guess, investing in diesel bus infrastructure now, such as like new diesel bus garages? Does that delay the move to electric and actually create barriers against this progression, or it wouldn't be create a barrier against progression?
I think I would need to learn more and study that a bit more in order to give you a better answer. But
Awesome.
happy to follow up with you on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's all the questions I have, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mr. Bean, you said you had one other thing.
One other thing that I wanted to highlight is initiative of the COG board. This came out of the COG board in early January, just a week after the January 6th riot at the Capitol. And this was an initiative for statehood for the DC. We've set up a statehood task force, predominantly Maryland members and Virginia members, but glad to have you as part of that COG board task force, Mr. Chairman. Last month, the task force provided an initial briefing and a very powerful presentation by the executive director of the ACLU. Task force is hard at work with a resolution to put before the COG board of directors, which I would expect at its April 14th board meeting for the COG board to consider an endorsement of statehood for the District of Columbia.
Thank you. Yes, I was wondering, that wasn't in your statement, and I'm glad you brought it up. Thank you. I have no further questions for you. So you're excused. I would say that Mr. Srikanth is excused, except we haven't seen him. But I appreciate his effort. He gets a gold star for effort. Thank you, Mr. Bean. If we have further questions, we'll let you know. We're going to turn now to testimony regarding the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Commission. I'm going to recognize the non-government witnesses first. They'll all come in, be let in, and then we'll hear from them. Shannon Hodge, who's with the DC Charter School Alliance. Ronald Thompson, who's with Greater Washington. Renee Bowser, Commissioner with ANC 4D02. Caitlin Roger, who's with the DC Sustainable Transportation. Elliot Nagin, who's with Union of Concerned Scientists. Solomon K. Palmer, Jr. John Higgins, who's an ANC Commissioner 3G02. Stephanie Klein, who's with Moms Clean Air Force. Louis Gottschalk, who is with the Sierra Club, DC chapter, and David Barron, who's with Earth Justice. Just a second. You'll be on a 4-minute clock. Last week I was giving folks a 3-minute clock, so I'm trying to readjust. But please be mindful, there's a timer and gallery view at the top, and I will cut you off at 4 minutes. We'll begin with Ms. Hodge, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and members of the committee. My name is Shannon Hodge, and I'm the founding executive director of the DC Charter School Alliance, the local nonprofit that advocates on behalf of public charter schools to ensure that all students in the district receive the great public education they deserve. I'm here to testify about WMATA and encourage the agency to work with charter schools as they reopen. During DDOT's performance oversight hearing last month, we shared our appreciation for the agency's Kids Ride Free program. This program allows students to ride for free on Metrobus, Metro Rail, and the DC Circulator while traveling within the district. The program is critical for the more than 33,500 students who commute to and from their schools. And although its numbers are reduced as a result of remote learning during the pandemic, the program and the access to transportation it provides are still critical for the thousands of students going to school buildings for in-person learning and support. For learning to exist, students must feel safe, cared for, and attended to. This is as true in school buildings as it is in students' journeys to and from school. We know from school leaders that they and the families they serve are concerned about students' health and safety on public transit during the pandemic. Public transportation for students, particularly in the District of Columbia, is at its core an equity issue. And we know that many of the students who rely on public transportation to get to and from school buildings are the same ones who are at the greatest risk of transmission. And these are often the same students whose communities have experienced disproportionate health outcomes from the virus and who are less likely to receive the vaccine. We have 2 specific recommendations for WMATA to address public transit issues during the public health emergency. First, we encourage WMATA to engage with school leaders as they plan to expand in-person learning. To respond to their community's concerns and the desire to get more students back in school buildings, school leaders must think even more strategically and innovate even more in almost every area, including school transportation. They want to do everything they can to ensure that students and families feel as safe as possible using public transit to and from school buildings. WMATA can be a helpful planning partner in this work. In addition, we encourage WMATA to take public steps to demonstrate that it can handle this increased student ridership safely. To that end, we would like to coordinate with WMATA and the Kids Ride Free program on a COVID-19 safety campaign to encourage social distancing and other coronavirus mitigation strategies on public transportation, particularly amongst students. We hope this committee will work with our sector and WMATA on these issues. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hodge. Ronald Thompson. I don't think I see him here. Renee Bowser, Commissioner Bowser. You're muted, Commissioner.
As I was saying, good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and Councilmember Louis George and any other council members who have joined the committee today. My name is Renee Bowser, and I'm an ANC Commissioner for Single Member District 4D02 and Advisory Neighborhood Commission 4D Chair, and I'm testifying on behalf of our commission. On January 27th, ANC 4D unanimously passed resolution of Advisory Neighborhood Commission 4D regarding proposed WMATA bus cuts and changes for FY 2022 and submitted the resolution to WMATA, to the DC Council Committee on Transportation and Environment Chair Mary Che, and to the legislative staff of that committee's council members. ANC 4D's testimony today is important even in light of recent news reports suggesting that WMATA's FY22 service cuts may not materialize. Our commission wants to ensure that all planned cuts to combined routes 62, 63 be reversed. Accordingly, the commission urges full restoration of 62, 63 service, including reinstatement of the days of service, hours over which the service extends, and frequency of service. The bus routes 62 and 63 constitute major bus routes that run from Tacoma Metro Station south through basically the center of Ward 4, east of Georgia Avenue Northwest. The combined routes travel along 5th Street and Kansas Avenue to connect with the Georgia Avenue Petworth Metro. Route 63 then continues south from the Georgia Avenue Petworth Station along Sherman Avenue and connects with the African American Civil War Museum and Cardozo Metro Station and ends at the Federal Triangle Metro Station. These buses are so important for Ward 4 constituents. First, the routes are important to many school students, as the previous testifier said, as those routes border or run close to Coolidge High School, Ida B. Wells Middle School, Whittier Education Campus, Barnard Elementary School, E.L. Haynes Public Charter School, and Roosevelt High School. They are essential to the students attending these schools, as well as the parents who drop off and pick up their students. As well, these routes are important to workers who report that they use them on a daily basis and weekends to get to and from work downtown. Workers in my SMD informed me that many times 2 or 3 buses pass them because they are already passive riders. Finally, these routes are essential for shopping, as residents have told me they ride the bus to and from the Safeway at Georgia Avenue and Randolph Streets. Moreover, it's important to emphasize that the Kennedy, Ward 4 short-term family housing located at 5505 5th Street, just off Kennedy Street in SMD 402 and ANC 4D was located along the routes 62, 63 to provide access to schools by students and the resident families and access to transportation for work and public services by their parents. The limiting and elimination of these routes will have grave consequences. First, students, parents, and workers deprived of Route 62, 63 will have to walk west a half a mile at least or more to Georgia Avenue and east for other public transportation. Residents of the Kennedy who may be forced to use the bus to travel to the metro in order to get downtown will have to pay a new fare because there's no transfer from the bus to the metro rail. Finally, WMATA's FY 2022 proposed Metro Bus Consolidated Route Network Service Plan, effective January 2022, proclaims that equity, essential travel, current ridership, and redundancy are the key three criteria. And while some consideration of, and it mentions that equity, they acknowledge that equity and essential travel is a key criterion, stating as today's ridership skews to the low income who rely on Metro for essential travel to groceries, medical appointments, and daily necessities. The routes also support access to jobs and healthcare, hospitals, and other sectors. And so we would believe while some consolidation of routes along the same corridor may be reasonable, when bus travel is so essential to such consolidation should not result in more commuting time to get to the bus. My time is short.
Thank you, Commissioner. Caitlin Roger with the DC Sustainable Transportation.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairperson Mendelson and members of the committee. DC Sustainable Transportation is a nonprofit organization which brings together business, advocacy, and government entities to make DC a global leader with frequent, rapid, safe, affordable, and reliable transportation to, from, and around DC job centers. Our members include 10 of DC's business improvement districts, business groups including the Federal City Council and Greater Washington Partnership, and advocacy groups like the Coalition for Smarter Growth, Sierra Club DC Chapter, Transportation Equity Network, the Washington Area Bicyclist Association, and Greater Washington. DCST works closely with WMATA to improve transit services and increase transit use in the District of Columbia. We recognize the constraints that WMATA has been under in presenting balanced budget proposals in the face of unusually high uncertainty for the 2021 and 2022 fiscal years. We'd offer the following recommendations to strengthen WMATA's capacity to contribute to a sustained and equitable recovery. Restoring full service levels. DCST would like to highlight the essential nature of transit services, both during and as we emerge from the pandemic period. Without a doubt, both economic growth and social equity goals depend absolutely on workers, residents, and visitors being able to move smoothly into, out of, and around Washington, DC without the use of a single occupancy vehicle. A glut of car-based commutes and other trips would vastly slow down mobility and stifle the economy that we need to restore jobs and opportunity. To that point, reducing transit services anytime in the coming year would be a short-sighted move. While we're pleased that federal funding will probably make the majority of cuts mooted in the original FY22 budget unnecessary, we would strongly encourage WMATA to commit to a full restoration of services to pre-pandemic levels as a pillar of the Washington region's recovery strategy. As a representative of both the business and advocacy community, the DCST coalition would underscore the importance of regular, reliable transit service on both rail and bus, a return to pre-pandemic late night, early morning service hours, and keeping stations open as critical into ensuring that workers, residents, and visitors can access jobs, opportunities, and essential for services. Second, recommendations around the bus transformation project. WMATA has a set of recommendations in the bus transformation project, of which DCST would like to see uptake to ensure that the bus in particular is poised to play its part. The majority of bus riders in the district are living on low incomes, people of color, or both. If we truly want an equitable recovery, we absolutely need to invest in one of the most essential mobility services for bus riders. The bus transformation project engaged with residents, workers, advocacy groups, businesses, experts, and transportation leaders throughout the region and found that transforming bus services means fast, frequent, reliable, and affordable bus service that feels like a unified system. Among the key recommendations are frequent and convenient bus service, bus priority on roadways, customer experience, and a task force to implement the strategy. These, and I put a link to this in my letter. These recommendations are more important now than they were pre-pandemic, which is when they came out. On point 2, DCST would highlight the importance of enforcement to ensure that the district's investment in bus lanes, a move that we've applaud, have their full or any beneficial impacts on mobility, equity, and growth. The disconnect between DDOT, DPW, and WMATA in this respect is costing DC a lot of the value we should be getting out of these potentially transformative investments. The third recommendation is around working with employers to make the return to work transit-led. DCST sees now as an important opportunity for WMATA to work with employers to incentivize workers to use transit to access and move around local businesses, residents, schools, recreational facilities, and other amenities. We appreciate General Manager Paul Wiedefeld's comments that post-pandemic transit services may reflect a smoother usage pattern and less emphasis on peak travel times. With an estimated $1 billion expected from the stimulus passage, now is the time to focus on opportunities that will pay off in the long term and to center equity. Equity means investing in bus, as well as rethinking how transit could play a bigger role in the future of DC and the people who live, work, or otherwise enjoy our city. Thank you, and I'm very happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Roger. The next witness is Elliot Nagan with Union of Concerned Scientists.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and committee members. Thanks for allowing me to testify today on behalf of the Union of Concerned Scientists. 21 years ago, when I was working for the Natural Resource Defense Council, I joined forces with the Sierra Club and 24 other public interest groups to pull Metro kicking and screaming into the 21st century. Back then, Metro was firmly committed to maintaining a diesel-only bus fleet. It had just signed a contract for 360 new diesel buses. We wanted Metro to buy compressed natural gas, or CNG buses, which at the time were the cleanest option. It took years of lobbying, but we were ultimately successful, at least partially, thanks to the support we received from the DC City Council and other local elected officials. Chairman Mendelson was there, and I know he remembers. The Metro fleet is now a third CNG, but the rest of it is still diesel. Today, Metro is at another crossroads. CNG, which is mainly methane, is no longer the cleanest option. The cleanest option is electric. Regardless, Metro signed a contract in 2018 for 694 buses to replace nearly half of its fleet. All of those buses it ordered are fossil fuel powered. Given the climate crisis and the health threat posed by toxic bus emissions, Metro's procurement plans are as unacceptable and nonsensical as they were 20 years ago. Bus authorities across the country are going electric. Los Angeles plans to convert its fleet by 2028. San Francisco will electrify its buses by 2035. And New York City, with the nation's largest fleet, will be all electric by 2040. Metro is lagging behind. At this point, it currently has one electric bus, is installing charging equipment at 2 bus garages, and is planning to launch a 2-year pilot project this year with 12 electric buses. But at the same time, Metro is taking these baby steps on electrification, is continuing to buy hundreds of fossil fuel buses. It also reportedly plans to install new CNG fueling equipment at one of its Maryland garages. That would have made sense 20 years ago, but it makes absolutely no sense today. If Metro was truly committed to electrifying its fleet, any new CNG fueling equipment would become a stranded asset. In other words, a complete waste of money. I now work for the Union of Concerned Scientists, which was a member of our coalition 2 decades ago. And I'm again collaborating with the Sierra Club and 24 other groups to prod Metro to do the right thing. Specifically, we are calling on the agency to abandon its plans for any new CNG fueling infrastructure, stop buying fossil fuel buses by no later than 2025, and commit to transitioning to an all-electric fleet by no later than 2045. That 2045 target is in keeping with the Clean Energy DC Act's date for 100% zero-emission vehicles. But there's no reason why Metro could not meet that goal a decade earlier. I'm here to ask for the City Council support. It made a big difference 2 decades ago, and you would make a big difference now. 20 years ago, there was a DC City Council resolution supporting our efforts, and we'd love to see one now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Nagan. Solomon Palmer. I have a statement from Wanda Palmer. I take it neither is here. John Higgins, who's an ANC commissioner. Is he here?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. I can't see you.
Okay, sorry about that. I am John Higgins, a commissioner with the ANC 34G, representing Chevy Chase, Hawthorne, and Barnaby Woods. I'd like to thank the council for the opportunity to testify today. Hold on, I'm getting my video up. Okay. We asked that the council put our full comments for the record. I will just briefly give some comments today. WMATA is proposing temporary curtailment of the E6 and the M4 route and then permanent elimination of these routes in the spring of 2022. The position of our ANC is that these bus routes should be restored to their full status on a permanent basis. Our ANC and the DC Office of Planning are just now embarking on a small area plan designed to retain and enhance the vitality of our neighborhood. It is acknowledged that robust public transit will be a key element in achieving these goals, according to the Office of Planning's report of April 2019. The M4 and the E6 bus routes are critical to the Office of Planning's vision for our neighborhood. Specifically to the E6 bus, WMATA proposes to drop that bus service, in which case students would lose bus access to Lafayette Elementary School. Some parents remarked that they ride to the school in the morning with their children, and then they continue on to Friendship Heights. The E6 is particularly important for seniors who live at the Knollwood Life Plan community at Oregon Avenue. Knollwood and other residents use the E6 bus to get to the Chevy Chase Library, the community center, the Safeway, and the CVS pharmacy. And just a full disclosure, Mr. Chairman, I'm a resident of Knollwood, and I can vouch for the importance of this route, especially to the wonderful help who help us help our seniors here at Knollwood. So just a personal note there. In terms of the M4, WMATA is unrecognizing regarding the importance of those students. The timetable published by WMATA shows two special student routes leaving Tenley Circle at 3:20 and 3:25 p.m. daily, terminating at Pinehurst Circle. The timetable notes that this route operates only on days when school is open. How can WMATA recognize these public school need and then propose to eliminate the service? That bus, by the way, sometimes is so full that the kids have to wait 2 or 3 turns before they can get on the bus in the first place. So very briefly, we urge the council to take whatever action is necessary, working with WMATA to maintain full service on both of these important routes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Stephanie Klein, who's with Moms Clean Air Force.
Chairman Mendelson and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I am the DC field organizer for Moms Clean Air Force, which is a movement of over 1 million moms and dads nationwide, united to protect our children's health from air pollution and climate change. I live in Ward 1 and am a parent to 2 young daughters, ages 4 and 6. As a longtime DC resident, I have personally utilized Metro for transportation for nearly 20 years. Like hundreds of thousands of people living in the DMV, I have relied upon Metro trains and buses to get to and from work and trusted them to transport my kids to and from school. I recognize that WMATA has done much hard work and focused a lot of resources over the past several years to improve track safety and customer satisfaction. I also appreciate that WMATA has done its best to continue service to essential workers and others during the COVID-19 pandemic, in spite of a major budget shortfall. WMATA has shown that it takes its commitment to providing the people of Washington, D.C., the Washington, D.C. region with reliable public transit seriously. As a parent and advocate, though, I am concerned by the fact that D.C. has fallen behind other major cities in terms of electrifying its bus fleet. Cities around the country, including New York, Chicago, Seattle, and Los Angeles, have committed to electrifying their bus fleets over the next 15 to 20 years. They are already in the process of procuring and operating hundreds of electric transit buses. Although WMATA has engaged in some planning to eventually transition its fleet to zero emission vehicles, to date, it has only 1 electric bus in its fleet. And it has contracted to purchase roughly 700 new diesel and compressed natural gas buses through 2025. This demonstrates a movement in the wrong direction and does not align with our city's mandate to electrify 50% of its bus fleet by 2030 and 100% by 2045, as laid out in the Clean Energy DC Omnibus Act. Putting off a transition to zero emission buses has real and immediate impacts on our region's air quality. WMATA operates a fleet of 1,500 buses in the Washington region, the majority of which are diesel fueled, with about 1/4 fueled by natural gas. Fossil fuel powered buses emit large amounts of toxic pollution into the air that causes cancer, triggers asthma attacks, and makes climate change worse. There is no safe level of exposure to diesel exhaust, especially for children. And the pollution doesn't have to be visible in the form of a big black plume to be harmful. It's there even when you can't see it. On top of the pollution that we are exposed to in our outdoor air, people who ride metro buses are exposed to even higher levels of exhaust. Estimates indicate that air pollutant levels in the interior cabin of a diesel bus can be up to 5 times higher than what a driver directly in the front of the bus experiences. And because children's lungs haven't fully developed and they breathe at a more rapid rate than adults, the impact of this harmful pollution is exacerbated in school-age children. The result, respiratory illness, worsening asthma, and even poor performance in class. In DC, a city with one of the highest childhood asthma rates in the country, all of this means that many families, particularly those in wards 7 and 8, where air quality is the worst, must engage in the difficult and delicate balance of weighing the physical and mental health of their children each day. For kids with asthma, playing outdoors on a high ozone day might mean triggering an allergy or asthma attack. Moms Clean Air Force applauds WMATA for the work it has already done to begin planning for a transition to a zero-emission bus fleet.
Thank you, Ms. Klein.
Cannot wait.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Louis Gottschalk with the Sierra Club.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Councilmember Louis George. My name is Lucas Gottschalk. I'm a volunteer with the DC chapter of the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club is one of the nation's oldest and largest environmental groups. We have almost 3,000 dues-paying members in the District of Columbia. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of the Sierra Club for this performance oversight hearing. Reviewing the last year, we recognize that the coronavirus pandemic affected Metro ridership significantly over the past year. Transit has been and will continue to be a lifeline for essential workers throughout the pandemic. And we thank the Metro employees for their hard work in continuing this essential transportation service during the public health emergency. Going forward, we are strongly opposed to service cuts, such as allowing train headways of over 20 minutes, closing stations, and eliminating bus routes that would permanently damage the reliability of Metro as a transit option. With the passage of President Biden's American Recovery Plan, we are hopeful that these service cuts can be avoided. Switching over to climate change, as the 6th largest transit fleet operator in the country, WMATA already plays a significant role in reducing greenhouse gas, particulate, and ozone emissions, and that role will only grow more into the future. WMATA's sustainability report, as well as its 2025 Energy Action Plan, demonstrate that it is taking meaningful steps to improve the sustainability of its operations, from LEED certification of new buildings, to reducing and diverting waste, to improving energy efficiency. The Sierra Club applauds these efforts and looks forward to reviewing the next iteration of WMATA's sustainability targets, which we hope will go even further to include net zero energy buildings. There is one area, however, where WMATA is moving in the wrong direction on climate change: its bus fleet. Currently, all Metro buses are powered by fossil fuels, except for one battery electric bus. Additionally, the agency is contracted to purchase roughly 700 new diesel and CNG buses through 2025. This is a step backward for WMATA, DC, and the climate. Major transit agencies across the country, including larger cold weather cities like New York and Chicago, and even DC's own circulator, have committed to fully electrify their fleets on aggressive timelines and already have electric buses in service. The Sierra Club, Union of Concerned Scientists, Moms Clean Air Force, Earth Justice, and more than 20 other partner organizations have called on WMATA to commit to 100% electrification of its transit bus fleet no later than 2045, and to take immediate steps towards achieving that goal. The Sierra Club issued a report showing that bus electrification by WMATA would save the agency hundreds of millions of dollars on the lifetime fleet operating costs, reduce annual carbon pollution by more than 58,000 tons by 2030 and more in later years, and reduce the public health toll that toxic air pollution has on the area's most vulnerable residents, while saving these residents millions of dollars annually in avoided healthcare costs. Electric buses are not the future, they are the present. The Sierra Club believes WMATA has the potential to be a leader in this area, and we call on WMATA to prioritize this work and share more information on electric bus pilots and planning. Thank you for allowing the Sierra Club to testify before this committee about the service WMATA provides to this city and the importance of reducing emissions from the transportation sector. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gottschalk. David Barron with Earth Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, council members. I'm here to testify in favor of the council pressing WMATA to electrify its fleet. The reasons for doing that have already been eloquently stated by others. I only want to emphasize a few points. I am, by the way, managing attorney with the Earth Justice DC Regional Office. We've been located in the district for more than 40 years. A few additional points I'd like to add to what my fellow public interest advocates have mentioned is first, emphasize the disconnect between WMATA's continued purchase of fossil fuel buses and the goals of the DC climate law. And that's been emphasized by some of my colleagues as well. When you buy these fossil fuel buses, you're locking the district and the region into dirty emissions for 15 years or more. These buses, once they're out there, they can't economically be pulled off without a great investment. And so we need to stop this purchase of dirty buses now. The second point is, this is a health issue. This is a public health issue, and it's not just climate pollution. It's also pollution that contributes to asthma attacks, to hospitalizations, to emergency room visits, and even premature deaths. EPA has identified diesel emissions as likely to be carcinogenic in humans. And as Mr. Gottschalk stated, electric buses can save money. The report that he referred to was based on a Argonne National Laboratories model that estimated that electrifying 50% of WMATA's fleet by 2030 would save more than $350 million over the useful life of the electric buses. So I'm not going to repeat what all the others said. They made the points eloquently, but it would be really helpful, number one, for the committee members to question WMATA about why they're so behind other cities in electrifying the fleet. And secondly, whether they're willing to commit right now to do what the other cities have done and promise us a clean electric bus fleet on an expedited schedule. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. And Mr. Palmer has joined us. Please proceed.
Yes. Good afternoon, Councilman Mendelson and Councilmember George. My name is Solomon K. Palmer Jr., a proud senior citizen of Ward 4 and specifically Techworth. For the record, DC has been my home for over 44 years, which most of it has been in the Techworth neighborhood. I come to this moment with mixed feelings, not about the topic, but rather about the results of my and other citizens' efforts. What I mean, are we just going through the motions this afternoon? Or will our thoughts be given real consideration or fall on deaf ears? In other words, have WMATA already made up her mind? It is with this urgency I join my neighbors and appeal to you to consider how your decisions to reduce and or eliminate the bus routes 62 and 63 will impact on the livelihood of my fellow neighbors of Techworth. For some of us in Techworth, the 6263 is our only means of transportation, for instance, for shopping for groceries, doctor's appointments, faith-based activities, local schools, recreational places, etc. I could add others, however, suffice it to say, I hope that you've got my point. we depend upon bus service to conduct life-related activities for basic survival needs and even more to thrive. Let me say that again, and even more to thrive as all human beings desire. I need not waste your time on the logistics of how 62 and 63 intersect with other routes. We've heard that. I'm not here to make that argument. That information is a matter of record. It is offered, however, to demonstrate the enormous role that the 62, 63 play and the negative ramifications it would have if these two bus lines are reduced or eliminated. While we are having this conversation about reducing and or eliminating transportation, it seems to me a little ironic that as we are meeting here this afternoon to make our voices heard about once again reducing or eliminating bus service, DDOT, Department of the District of Transportation, is engaging seniors and other DC residents about how to improve multimodal transportation in DC for the future. Let me conclude by saying we have never encountered anything like COVID, and it has caused us to reimagine how we do things. Let this be your moment, council member and other members of the committee. Do as Dr. King challenged us to do right because it is always the right time. I hope and pray you will oppose any decision that will undermine the transportation needs of citizens in Petworth. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to testify before you today, and I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Thank you, each of you, for your testimony. I just have a couple of questions. I think I'll start with Mr. Nagin. I'm interested in cost of electric buses. David Barron in his testimony had some figures about savings, which I'm sure you're familiar with. My impression is that an electric bus will cost more than a fossil fuel bus to purchase, and the operating costs will be substantially less. Do you have any figures on cost?
Yeah, I actually do. They're arranged though. Okay.
Sure.
I was just able to obtain this information. It's been very difficult to shake this information loose, by the way. That's a bigger issue of how opaque WMATA is. It's impossible to get any information out of this agency. Anyway, New Flyer is the company that Metro has contracted with in 2018. They make electric buses, diesel buses, and natural gas buses, as well as diesel electrics. A 40-foot CNG bus is anywhere from $557,000 to $620,000 per bus. A 40-foot diesel bus is $527,000 to $599,000 per bus. And those are 40-foot buses, by the way. But a 60-foot, and a 60-foot high-capacity bus is more. It's $773,000 to $803,000 per bus. Again, the number I have that I heard was that an electric bus, I'm assuming it's the 40-foot bus, would be closer to $950,000. But that information came from a different source. The source where I got these numbers didn't have that information because WMATA did not contract for electric buses. So I would verify that number with WMATA. It might be less, but the number I get, so they are more expensive. Now it's also a question of economies of scale. So the more that they make of these buses, the cheaper they become. All these buses have gotten cheaper. And one other thing to consider is that, from what I understand, the federal government pays the lion's share of the cost of each bus.
Well, I took two important things from what you said, and I realized figures are approximate. That electric is half again the cost of CNG, And that new flyer makes electric as well as CNG as well as diesel.
Yeah, like I said, the top end of a CNG bus would be 620,000.
Yeah.
And this would be closer to 100, closer. Yeah, your numbers, you're correct in what you just said. Yes, but again, we should verify that number on for an electric bus with Metro, because I got that from a third party, and that was a couple. So I don't know how accurate it was. I got it from someone from the Department of Energy. Department of Transportation a couple of years ago.
Sure. I don't have any other questions for you. Let me see if Councilmember Lewis George does.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to thank my neighbors in Ward 4 for testifying today. I'm pleased to see, WMATA is pursuing a revised budget, but I echo deep concern that these cuts were considered, and we want to be sure that they are not considered again. I want to go to Mr. Nagin and Ms. Klein. I was really interested in your testimony. I'm very concerned about WMATA's planned investment to renovate the Northern Bus Garage with the focus on diesel buses. Not only will this create a negative environmental impact in a residential area, but it seems the wrong time to be investing in diesel infrastructure instead of moving to an electric fleet and facilities. Are you familiar with this project, and can you share your recommendations around what WMATA should instead prioritize in renovating the Northern Bus Garage on 14th Street Northwest?
Stephanie, you want to jump in, or can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah,
So,
I can hear you. I'm aware of that project, but don't feel like I have enough familiarity to speak to your question.
Okay.
from what I understand, I'll just jump in here, that that Metro is putting electric charging equipment into the Northern Bus Garage. But at this point, because it only has one electric bus in its fleet, and we'll only have over the next 2 years a dozen more, I don't think it has any plans, or I have no idea if it has plans to put any of those buses in that garage. So they're going to still be running diesel buses into that garage and natural gas buses. Actually, actually just diesel, because they can't fuel natural gas buses there. So it's only diesel buses in that garage.
Yeah. I wanted to go to our commissioners. I'll start with Commissioner Bowser and then go to Commissioner Higgins. Commissioner Bowser, thank you for being here. I didn't have a question, but wanted to offer you the chance to finish that last bit of your testimony or offer additional comments on the critical bus route.
Oh, I was explaining that WMATA did a proposed Metro Bus Consolidated Route Network Service Plan effective January 2, 2022, and they proclaimed 3 key criteria: equity/essential travel, current ridership, and redundancy. Mm-hmm. Equity is a key criterion because it states that today's ridership skews to the low income who rely on Metro for essential travel to groceries, medical appointments, daily necessities, access to jobs, healthcare, and hospitals, and other sectors. And in November 20, they did an equity analysis, and they came out to say that there was no disparate impact for the reductions that they were proposing for the 2021 fiscal year budget. Mm-hmm. But it's not clear that they even considered the limited access that working class and poor people have to use other sources. Okay. And so they didn't indicate that. And so it's not clear how they reached, and that they did not show how they reached the fact as thoroughly as I thought they should of why there was no disparate impact. So basically, just in summary, I said that Ward 4 reported the highest number of COVID-19 cases in the city over many months during the continuing COVID-19 pandemic and public emergency, because even though we are a rapidly gentrifying area, it is home to a significant number of essential and frontline workers who must report to work. At a time when existing inequities are being exposed and conditions exacerbated, equity requires Ward 4 residents who depend on Route 6263 not be subjected to increased hardship while attempting to conduct their lives as safely as possible. Accordingly, ANC 4D urges that there be no cuts in the number of days, hours of service, or frequency of service concerning bus route 6263. And thank you for letting me finish my testimony. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner Bowser. And Commissioner Higgins, you spoke about the E6 and M4 bus route. Just could you speak to, I took the M6 a number of times to go to school back and forth, the M4, sorry, to go back and forth to school. So could you just speak about the critical need for those bus lines?
Well, I think you're right about the M4. The M4 at 33rd and Military connects to other crosstown buses, which helps kids from other neighborhoods to get to Alice Steele. I think that was your experience when you were in school.
Yeah.
And the E6 bus also, I'd like to make one more point about that in terms of the Norwood employees. We estimate it was costing our employees over $100 a week for substitute transit versus taxis and Uber. And that's really a pretty hefty thing. And so we have wonderful employees here. They have to come to work. They have to get back to work. This is not a telework job. This is a real physical job, and they need that service. One more thing I'd like to say, if I may, this is more of a macro issue, that I think the council perhaps could help in fostering increasing support with Maryland, Virginia, even the state legislatures to support Metro as a system. I think it's pretty apparent from all the testimony that all of these routes are related to the economic well-being of an entire Mid-Atlantic region, and it really needs support. I'm going to hope the COVID-19 helps out, but I think long-term, it's going to require continued support from all the jurisdictions. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember. That is going to conclude questions I have, or from Councilmember Lewis George. So I want to thank each of you for your time and for your testimony. A couple of you didn't give us written statements. If you would, that would be appreciated. With that, you're excused. I believe you can go back to the waiting room and continue to watch the hearing. And I'm going to call now the witnesses related to Metro itself. So again, thank you. Paul Wiedefeld, who's the General Manager and CEO of Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Commission. Jeffrey Sherrington, who is Inspector General with the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Administration. And Shamila Samarasinghe, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name. She's the Acting Chief Executive Officer for the Metro Rail Safety Commission. What I'm going to do is hear from each of you, and then we'll have at least one 10-minute round of questions. So Mr. Wiedefeld, you would be first. Mr. Wiedefeld, I can see your box, but not you. And I can't hear you either. And now I can see you, but I still can't hear you. Say that again? What my staff tells me is that if you look at the mute button at the bottom of your screen, there's a little caret. And if you press that, I believe there is the ability to test your speaker and microphone. This is what I like about Zoom. I still cannot hear you. I see you speaking. So again, with that caret, mine says microphone array, Realtek audio, but you could try same as system. And then the other is to going further down, test speaker and microphone, where you can hear yourself speak if you.
Or you can switch to phone audio and call himself, talk to his phone. And we watch on video.
I've tried everyone. Can you hear me now?
Whoa, yes.
You can hear me now.
Yes, don't move a thing.
I'm not going to touch anything. Very good. Are you ready, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you again for the time, and I'm sorry for the confusion there. What I was hoping to do is walk you through both the 20 budget, 21 budget, which we're in the middle of, talk about the 22 as well, and then hit upon some just updates on some real estate issues, sustainability, and some policing issues. I think these are all issues that the council wanted to hear more about. With me today are a few of my staff members, our CFO, Dennis Anasiki, our Chief of Police, Chief Pavlik, our Chief of Bus Planning, Peter Cafaro, and our Bus Operations Leader, Mr. Bob Potts, that may come in to answer some questions. So just for fiscal year 20 at a glance, remember our fiscal year starts July 1. We're in very good position going into pre-COVID. Our ridership was up and our customer satisfaction was up. Unfortunately, as we all went through what we went through, that dropped very, very dramatically, very quickly. Our focus during fiscal year 20 was obviously on the safety of our employees and moving those people, safety of our customers, and moving those to most essential to get to work and other essential activities that they needed to do. And a number of things we did to do that. We were facing a very tough budget, as you can imagine, but thankfully to the CARES Act, we were able to deliver the 20 budget basically on budget, again, using those federal dollars to do that. Our ridership, just so you understand, in 20 system-wide, the ridership was down 25%. Our revenues were down roughly 28%, and our expenses were just about flat. They dropped just a bit. In fiscal year 20, we did not ask the local governments for any additional subsidy. Again, we used the CARES Act money to cover us through 20 on the operating side. On the capital side, we continued to deliver capital projects, largely due to the dedicated funding that we got from the region several years ago. We delivered almost $1.7 billion worth of investment. That was roughly 98% of what we asked for, compared to roughly, we were delivering roughly 60 to 70% several years ago. We were able to buy the 7000 series cars, which perform much better and a much better customer service. We were able to provide wireless service through our entire tunnel system. We improved the lighting at a number of stations, and we continue to consolidate some of our office buildings to be more efficient. In the 21 budget, through the first 2 quarters, again, we were facing tremendous drop in ridership and in revenues. Our ridership had dropped roughly to 80% pre-COVID levels in 21. Our rail ridership was down almost 90%, and our bus ridership was down just over 60%. And Metro Access has been down about 60% as well. So you can imagine the corresponding drop in revenues was very dramatic. Fortunately, there was the passage of the additional COVID Relief Act in December. That allowed us not to make dramatic cuts in fiscal year 21, the current year we're in, with those dollars. And because of the operating revenues, again, had dropped so dramatically. With that, we were able to, again, continue to provide the service that we increased in August, and actually will continue to add more service this spring as the region starts to open up. On the capital side, again, we continued to focus on state of good repair investments. Basically, this year we will spend approximately $2 billion, again, using the dedicated revenues we have, the PREA funding that we have for capital improvements. And again, these things are all focusing on state of good repair, whether it's rail cars and rail facilities, the rail system, track and structure rehab, and bus and rail facilities. And the other thing that we have taken advantage is the low ridership, to get in and do some of the work that impacts customers, to do that while the numbers are low, particularly on the rail side. To do that, we've done quite a few improvements, particularly on the platform work that you've seen that we've done in the past. In terms of the 22 budget, which a lot of the public comments were concerned about, again, we had proposed to maintain the 21 budget through the first 6 months in hope and anticipation of additional federal dollars, which fortunately we have gotten. We will be taking to the board in first week of April our recommendations for the 22 budget. The staff's recommendations that we will not be making those cuts, whether it's the stations closings, whether it's the reduced rail service or the reduced bus service, many of which you just heard about. And again, I believe, I know we will take that to the board in early April, and that's what those dollars are there. Those cuts were proposed because we didn't have the dollars to do it, and if the dollars came, we would bring that service back. So that will be our recommendation going forward for the 22 budget. Mr. Chairman, you're on mute.
Correct, because I'm talking to my staff.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You're not supposed to hear what I'm saying to them.
Okay, I just saw your lips move. I wasn't sure if you were talking to me, sir. All right, so that's the 20, 21, and 22 budget. Again, I'll go into any further detail that you want. In terms of real estate, I did want to bring attention to 2 things. One is the Jackson Graham building, the headquarters of Metro. You know, the was built in the early 70s. We were moving out of that facility and moving to LaFont Plaza. That is a new joint use development of 400,000 square feet. That is a product that we've put out for a ground lease. So basically, we'll be getting revenue over the years to help deal with future operating costs. And that is expected to be completed in 2025 at the Jackson Graham building. I think we'll do quite a bit for that community. And then also the LaFont Plaza, where we will be moving in the end of this calendar year, hopefully, will also help that area as well. And 307th Street Southeast is where we'll be moving there. In terms of sustainability update, we are following an energy action plan. We expected to net $16 million in annual energy cost savings and another $13 million in operating and maintenance savings through 2025. We are initiating a zero emission bus planning effort. It's already underway. It started in June, has about 18 more months of work in it. That is where we are purchasing electric buses, and we'll be testing those, but also working with the suppliers, not only the buses, but also the infrastructure to support a very large network like we have in the Washington region. And yes, we will have both Bladensburg and Northern Bus Garages facilities electric bus ready as that process evolves. We also have done quite a bit on LED lighting through all of our stations. If you've seen our stations, they're much brighter and they're much more energy efficient. And we've also partnered on a solar project to provide solar panels on 4 garages that we have, and one of them being in Anacostia, which will basically save us roughly $50 million over a 25-year period. In terms of policing, community policing, we have been working very closely with the community and with a number of elected officials to improve our policing, giving everything that everyone's trying to do in policing to make it much better for everyone. We've created an internal oversight and youth service bureau. Basically, it oversees MPT's increased role with youth in the region. We've worked with the Fraternal Order of Police, focusing on police reform. The 8 Can't Wait campaign, where proactive strategy improve policing and MTPD in compliance with training and policies. And we've also partnership with the DC Public School Chancellor and the Deputy Mayor of Education. Again, some of the comments I heard earlier to make sure that we're reaching out to the school children as we start the new service back, as we start service back up, and also to deal with some of these ongoing issues. That has a summary very quickly. Again, I know that you have a lot of questions, but I just wanted to give you a brief overview, and we have some other members of the staff here to help us answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Wiedefeld. Jeffrey Charrington.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. I'm Jeff Charrington, the Inspector General for WMATA. Thank you for asking me to be here today. I appreciate this chance to discuss the significant work of the Office of Inspector General to improve effectiveness and efficiency at WMATA. I also appreciate this chance to describe briefly OIG's responsibilities and authorities as an independent oversight unit of WMATA. WMATA Compact provides the basic statutory authorities of WMATA and of OIG. Under the Compact, OIG is an independent and objective unit of the authority. We do 4 areas of work. We conduct and supervise audits, program evaluations, and investigations of authority activities. We promote economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in authority activities. We help detect and prevent fraud and abuse in authority activities, and we keep the board fully and currently informed about deficiencies in authority activities, along with progress on needed corrective action. Carrying out these 4 responsibilities, OIG has broad authority to conduct oversight of all WMATA activities. By resolution, Board of Directors directed that OIG has access to all WMATA records and the full cooperation of staff when necessary for performing our responsibilities. Board also directed that OIG enjoys the greatest independence and freedom from interference consistent with the WMATA Compact, including initiating, carrying out, and completing any audit or investigation and issuing any subpoena in the course of an audit or investigation. Compact makes no exceptions to OIG's oversight authority over WMATA activities. We've conducted oversight over all types of activities, including financial, operational, police, cybersecurity, and others. During fiscal years 20 and 21, as of March 1 of this year, OIG has completed or has underway at least 95 audits, 8 investigations of alleged misconduct, 7 management alerts on matters requiring immediate management attention, 3 management assistance reports making urgent recommendations to management, and 11 special projects looking in depth at various programs and practices in WMATA. Our audits alone during this period have identified over $65 million in funds that could be put to better use. Our written answers to the committee's questions provide details about this work. In addition to the work summarized in our written answers, OIG's investigations in earlier periods led to several significant criminal convictions during FY 20 and 21. I'd like to commend WMATA management as they have accepted our many recommendations and done so in a timely manner. I'd also like to thank the WMATA Board of Directors for their support of OIG and their emphasis on effective oversight. I'd also like to thank my very talented and professional OIG staff. I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charrington. And Ms. Samara Singha. You are on mute.
Thank you, Chairman Mendelson and council members for inviting the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission to testify today. I am Shamila Samarasinghe, Chief Operating Officer of the WMSC and its acting CEO. The WMSC is the District, Maryland, and Virginia's designated state safety oversight agency for WMATA's Metro Rail system. Our oversight authority over the system is broad and enforceable. This authority, however, does not extend to WMATA's bus fleet or Metro Access services. We are responsible for audits, investigations, inspections, emergency management oversight, corrective action plan oversight, and oversight of Metro Rail's safety certification process for complex projects like the Silver Line Phase 2. We are legally and financially independent from WMATA. This guarantees our objectivity in monitoring the safety of the Metro Rail system. Perhaps the most notable aspect of this oversight work last year was our safety audits. An example of the 5 audits we've completed in the last year is our audit of the Rail Operations Control Center, or ROCC, released last September. We increased our focus on the ROCC in December 2019 when we observed chaos and dysfunction in the ROCC, especially during emergencies. From December 2019 through September 2020, the WMSC identified and issued a total of 25 findings related to safety gaps in the Rail Operations Control Center. These findings were based on months spent interviewing Metro Rail staff, reviewing documents, data and recordings, and conducting independent observations. In response to each finding we issue, WMATA is required to develop corrective action plans, or CAPs, for approval by the WMSC. The CAPs are an indicator that there is robust and proactive oversight that identifies gaps in Metro Rail's performance and gets WMATA to work on solutions to fix these gaps. In 2020, the WMSC closed such 41 CAPs. Another way we provide oversight of Metro Rail is through inspections. We inspect track and structures, signal systems, electrical power, rail cars, rail operations, personnel, and emergency readiness. We use recorded and real-time communications to keep a constant set of eyes and ears on the system. Overall, in 2020, we undertook approximately 190 risk-based inspections, identifying WMATA's deficiencies and positive practices. When safety events take place, WMATA is required to conduct thorough investigations with our oversight. For example, the WMSC team responded to an October train pull-apart on the Red Line near Union Station. The WMSC was on the scene and then examined the coupler assembly at issue the next day. WMATA is keeping all 6,000 series trains out of service, in part due to concerns identified through the investigations into this event. These investigations ensure that lessons are learned and the likelihood of a similar event happening again is reduced. At the conclusion of each investigation, our commissioners adopt the investigation reports. The commissioners adopted such 35 reports in 2020. Again, thank you for inviting me to testify on our work with WMATA to continually improve the safety of the Metro Rail system. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Samarasinghe. So I have a few questions. We'll be on 10-minute rounds, and we'll probably have a couple of them. I'm going to begin with some questions for Mr. Wiedefeld concerning the electric buses. I know when we spoke last week, Mr. Wiedefeld, I neglected to mention that this was an issue, and I should have, and then we had the testimony today. Do you know what the cost is of an electric bus? Is it roughly $950,000?
I would say it's in that range, Mr. Chairman. The reason that we don't have an exact cost is we're in the middle of a procurement process for the buses for the study that we're doing. So we don't want to, I mean, we can't guess, or put anything out there in terms of a number because we're in procurement. But some of the literature I've seen, it's in that range, yes.
Okay, what is the cost? What would be the cost to cancel or convert your current contract with New Flyer?
I don't have an exact number for that. We started that contract in 2018, I believe, and it ends in roughly 2023. So we're fairly far along on it. So I can look into that. I just don't have that number like that.
I think I saw that it's a 5 to 7 year delivery, and so that would mean delivery would be in 2023 to 2025.
The contract started in, let me just double check.
Started in 2018.
2018 concludes in 2023. And it's 329 clean diesel and 150 CNG buses.
Can you provide?
I can find out that information, get it back to the committee.
Provide us with the delivery schedule. But why not? New Flyer apparently makes electric buses. Somebody testified to that, unless you know that that's not correct. Why not immediately ask New Flyer to convert the contract to electric? It'll cost more.
It's the reason is we need to create the infrastructure to support it. I mean, it's a much larger issue than running a few buses if you're going to convert a very large fleet. So that's the issue: is do we have the infrastructure to support it, whether it's in our bus divisions or in the grid, in effect, to support of the volume of buses that we would have. It's one thing to do a small number of buses. It's totally different to do 1,500 buses. And that's why when you see these other properties, whether it's New York or Chicago, there is this long lead time because they have to build the infrastructure as well. And that's what we want to do, but we have to basically create that. And that's what this study is to do, to determine what level of investment do we need to support a 1,500 bus fleet.
1,500 is your total bus fleet?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and the useful life of a bus is about 15 years, if I remember correctly?
10 to 12 usually, about 12 usually.
Okay, so you're buying buses today that you won't want to replace for 10 years or 12 years. And it seems to, we know that we're going to want electric buses in 2032. We want them now. So this just strikes me as madness to be continuing to get new buses. Now, with regard to the infrastructure, because I remember going through this with CNG, yeah, there's substantial infrastructure with CNG. You've got to figure out how to store under pressure that gas, and you've got to figure out how to deliver that gas to the buses under pressure and not blow the place up. Electric is a lot different. And to be sure, a DC line or a 240 volt line, there's some expense to installing that, but it's not huge. I mean, it's basically, I'm going to be accused of oversimplifying this, installing electrical outlets. So yeah, you'd have to heavy up the bus station because you're talking about, but you're not talking about 1,500 buses at one bus station. How many buses are at the Northern Barn? It's 300?
In that range, I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay,
I think
we're talking about, and in fact, do you know with electric buses, are the battery packs interchangeable?
That's why we're doing the $4 million study that we have underway, is to get to all those types of answers.
Well, I'm not sure what there is. I'm sorry, I'm a little frustrated, but I'm not sure what there is to study. I mean, you talk to New Flyer and the other manufacturers, do they have battery packs that are interchangeable? Why do I ask that? Because then it's a whole different operation in terms of whether you have to charge a bus overnight or you just replace the battery pack. But that's an answer you could give me in a week by contacting the different manufacturers. I mean, they either know they interchange the batteries or that you have to charge them.
But we also have to look at how the bus is used. Everything from the terrain or to the hours it goes out, and all those issues impact the cost and how you would apply this technology. So that's what we're trying to get, answers to before we make such a large commitment.
Well, but vehicles come with a range. I mean, I assume EPA looks at buses, maybe not. The manufacturers probably say the range is 100 miles on a charge, or 200 miles on a charge, or 300 miles. What's the experience in Los Angeles?
I don't know the experience on there. I know they're moving that way, but I do know we do 50 million miles a year. So we've got to make sure that we can support that type of investment, so that we have the infrastructure to support it.
Hold on. A bus doesn't do 50 million miles a year. A bus does so many miles a day. And a battery, the range of a bus is so many miles. So, and I don't know what a bus is. I might guess I could find that out in a week as well. A bus has a 200-mile range. Okay, how many, then what routes can it be on? I mean, Los Angeles has done this. What about the circulator? My understanding is the circulator has electric buses.
Mm-hmm. Again, it's the nature of the trip that our buses take is different than what a circulator takes in terms of its distance, in terms of its topography, and then also, I mean, it's the deadheading back, right, of the route. Not all, that's what you're monitoring. How far out can you go and come back? So that's, again, I'm with you. I mean, we want to get there, but I think we've got to understand it, and that's what we're trying to do right now.
I was mystified when I saw that you're getting 12 buses for a test. I don't know. I guess I would like these answers, whether battery packs are swappable or whether you would need to heavy up the bus barns for charging overnight.
Mm-hmm.
What's the experience with Los Angeles? What's the range of a bus? And roughly what the cost is. If nothing else, tell us what Los Angeles is paying for its electric buses.
Okay, I will follow up.
I mean, we just know we're going to go electric, so we might as well do it now. And we know it's either you're going to plug in the bus at night to charge it, or you're going to swap the battery pack. And let me just say in that regard, there's a Chinese manufacturer of cars. I doubt this applies to buses, and maybe the largest electric vehicle manufacturer in China. And a person who buys that car, they drive into I'm going to call it a charging station, and their battery pack is replaced in the time it would take the rest of us to fill up our gas. And they drive away with a full charge. I mean, we can't do that here, at least with automobiles, because there aren't enough of them and nobody has those kinds of battery, what do you call them? Battery swapping stations. But it's a great idea. And with a bus fleet, it may be that being able to swap the batteries is the way to go. I would appreciate answers to those questions. I'm near the end of my round. I'll turn to Councilmember Louis George.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank you for your testimony, first of all, and I want to also acknowledge, I see Ann Chisholm is here, and I want to acknowledge the work that Ann Chisholm has done in Ward 4, engaging our Ward 4 community and her team. They've done such a phenomenal job engaging our 14th Street Bus Barn community around the design aspects of it. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge that really community-based work that's happening in Ward 4 as a result of it. As you know, the community wants the new fleet that's housed in a residential area. 14th Street Bus Barn is in a heavy residential area with both young people, old people, older individuals. We're talking young people to seniors, a part of that ward, a part of that section of our ward. And so in such a residential area, to be full electric to reduce the impacts of a dense diesel exhaust. And so WMATA and your partner agency has basically said this cannot be done quickly. But I know you just shared with the chairman that WMATA, isn't purchasing electric buses yet because you need to create the infrastructure to support it. Yet in Ward 4, WMATA won't invest in electric infrastructure instead of diesel because you don't have the number of diesel buses. So I'm confused here. Can you explain why WMATA is investing in a diesel bus barn at the same time that you are saying that WMATA needs more electric infrastructure to meet the zero emission goals?
Because of the transition period it will take to convert such a large fleet over to electric.
Okay.
That's basically why. And again, I think that's what you see in Chicago and New York. That's why they have these, 35, 40, because that's what they're all doing. They have certain fleet. They've got to meet the demand they face today, next year. But at the same time, they're moving in that direction. And that's the same thing that we're headed towards.
Okay. And so we need a new diesel garage to do this. The existing aren't sufficient.
In terms of to meet the demand, you mean the demand on the system? Yes. I mean, that's why we have the divisions where we have them. Yes.
So can you provide a specific timeline for getting the Metro bus fleet to 50% and 100% electric benchmarks?
Yes, we're going to be bringing that to the board later this spring for their consideration.
What assurances do we have that as the last garage renovated, the Northern Bus Garage won't be the last in line for electrical conversion? I'm just feeling a bit confused here because WMATA is saying you need more electric infrastructure. The community is begging for it, and they're basically being told no.
Well, no, the plan is to have it electric ready. And then as we build the fleet up, that's where basically we would put them, because it would be the division that has it electric ready. And whereas the others would not yet. We've got to convert those. Now, Bladensburg is a new bus division. We would be doing the same there.
Okay. So, and I recognize you all are doing a study. There was another study requested from our community. WMATA has told the Uptown community that federal regulatory agencies are not requiring WMATA to complete robust environmental assessments and instead fall into the NEPA category exclusion. Yet WMATA can do more than the FTA requires, essentially. Can you help me understand why you wouldn't choose to do a more robust assessment anyway, if there's any chance that increased diesel will create additional health and environmental risk for our community? Why not complete the more robust environmental assessment / impact statement to better assess risk and instill confidence in the community?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we follow the federal regulations that we follow. And I think if we're following that, we're meeting their needs, we're meeting the letter of, in effect, what environmental you should be looking at. So that's what we're doing.
I mean, FDA's own regulations state that, pollutant hotspots can develop where more than 10 buses are coming or leaving a transit facility within an hour. Will particular hotspots be assessed in the category exclusion assessment? You said you listen to the federal standards, but what about the local community that surrounds the Northern Bus Barn?
Yeah, well, I do believe we've been working very closely with the community. But if I may, I would like to meet, if I could, with you, get my environmental people together and meet with you and just let me understand this a little bit more, if I could, with you.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and I would say WMATA has been meeting with the community, but it's based on design of the building, all these other factors. But where we've met contention is literally on this environmental piece. And you can understand that neighbors are naturally afraid, neighbors, seniors and young people, with the additional health and environmental risks that the community, is going to face. And so not doing the assessment creates, a greater risk, for the community. And that's why they want to have these assurances and these answers. And we just haven't been able to get them.
Again, I would like to meet with you to discuss further if we could.
Awesome. I welcome that meeting and hope that we can make that happen. We do have an environmental committee that we established here in Ward 4 who will bring, some of the studies that they've done to the table. I want to clarify something about WMATA's budgeting decisions. WMATA's operating subsidy in Maryland and Virginia is capped to 3% growth over previous years. What percentage increase of the operating subsidy is WMATA asking for in each of those jurisdictions this year? I'm sure you saw that the Washington Post reported in January that WMATA was not planning on asking for the full 3% increase in operating subsidies. And the article basically stated that this was done to help out funding jurisdictions. And so which jurisdictions, I guess, specifically asked for this?
Both Virginia and Maryland did, given their financial pressures. Just so you know, they actually, there will be an increase in their subsidy because there are things above the 3%.
Okay.
That then do kick in. So there is more money coming in from the local governments. So it isn't zero, but it was trying to, and the way we do that is what we've got to do internally to drive costs down. That's what we're trying to do, so that we don't ask for that 3%. Obviously, the federal dollars helps.
Okay, so I guess I'm concerned that the jurisdictions were granted this, as WMATA proposed, I guess, such severe cuts to DC service and employees. Why is WMATA not asking for the full 3% increase in operating subsidy when you were initially proposing service cuts, layoffs, and concessions, basically from workers?
Well, the cuts were across the region. They weren't just for the district. They were region-wide, the cuts were. And they were basically, we have this much service that we can provide, and with the drop in revenue, this is all we could do. If the region wanted to kick in more dollars, that was an option, of course, but they couldn't afford it. And so they said no, meaning, Maryland, Virginia said, no, we're comfortable with, meaning the board said, we're comfortable with this budget going out like this, given the pressures we're under, but fully aware that everything was happening on the federal side. And we were watching that very closely, as you can imagine, and working that very hard.
Okay. So, but maybe I missed it. Why aren't you asking for the full 3% increase to avoid the cuts?
Because we felt the pressure that they were under financially, that they didn't have the dollars either. That's what we were hearing from them as well. That they were under tremendous financial pressure as well. So that's where they're asking for any relief that we could provide.
Okay. I don't think I'm gonna. I'm not gonna make it to my next section, but I'm interested to hear in COVID-19. I'm interested to hear how your drivers and riders have fared during COVID-19. How many WMATA employees have tested positive for COVID since the beginning of pandemic, and how many of those positive results are known to have occurred through exposure on the job?
We've had just high level. Unfortunately, tragically, we've lost 4 employees to the virus. We've had over approximately 4,000 people out at some time because of the virus. That may have been that they were quarantined or a family member. We had roughly 1,200 people that have tested positive. The vast majority of these people are back at work. I believe last week we had 2 people still in the hospital. So it's something that, and one thing that we have done is we do mobile testing throughout the agency. Obviously, people can get tested in many places, but we've done that. We're running it every 2 weeks now. Our positivity rate has been about 1%, so that's a very good sign. We're doing it to make sure that people feel comfortable. So it's been something that we work very, very closely with our unions to basically, do the things that we need to do to keep them safe. If you may recall, at the beginning of the virus, we went to what we call AB days, in effect, where we didn't expose as many people working together to keep them safe. So there are a number of things that we put in place, and obviously all the masking, all the cleaning, and all those things. But we've been very aggressive at it, and literally we've been shoulder to shoulder with the union leadership to deal with this.
Okay. I'm sorry to hear about those losses, and I'll pick up on the next round. My time is over for this one. Thank you.
Mr. Wiedefeld, just to finish Councilmember Louis George's questioning, do you know how many of the employees who contracted the virus contracted it on the job?
No, we can't, we can't determine that. Okay.
I have a couple more follow-up questions on environment, and then I'll move on. Have you or has WMATA had any discussions with PEPCO or any other electricity provider or with the Public Service Commission with regard to rates if you heavy up for electric vehicles?
That's part of the effort that we have underway, is doing just that.
Well, saying that effort underway, have those discussions taken place or started, or that's on the list?
I believe we've reached out to them. I don't know how far along it is in that. I can get that to you as well to see where we are with their discussions.
Would you? And then your 2025 Energy Action Plan states that WMATA will strengthen its contribution to avoided regional CO2 emissions by avoiding an additional 160,000 metric tons of CO2 annually by 2025. Is the bus sector part of this? And how are you doing that if you're buying diesels?
Some of it I would believe would be through CNG, as was mentioned, a portion of the fleet there. Again, let me get you the details of what makes up that 162. I just don't have the top of my head.
Okay, well, I believe CNG is primarily methane, so it's probably not reducing carbon emissions.
Maybe. Yeah. Again, let me get the detail to support that number.
Okay. Just a reminder, an electric bus will have no carbon emissions. Let me ask you about employees. Only about 12% of Metro's employees live in the district, and only about 20% of new hires in your last fiscal year were district residents. What efforts is WMATA undertaking to recruit new hires from the district? And have you worked with our Department of Employment Services to foster opportunities to hire district residents?
We'd be glad to work with the department, that department or any other department. We are constantly trying to get a broader range of people from the region to come work for us. We have a very good work environment, I believe, and we are very open. So there's not any lack of effort. It's just some of the nature of the jobs, I think, may prevent some people from applying to them. So I can't talk to why it's not those numbers. The vast majority of our people do live in Maryland, Prince George's County. And that is, historically where a lot of people have come from, whether that's through communication that they have, what have you. But we constantly try to get as many people from around the region. And again, we have a wide range of opportunities, whether it's mechanical, bus operators, obviously finance people, IT people. So we'd be glad to work with anyone in the district to try to improve those numbers.
So I'm not hearing that there's anything specifically targeted to the district in hiring district residents. And I'm not hearing that there is an existing relationship with our Department of Employment Services.
I don't know if there is or isn't, sir. I just don't know at that level. I do know that we do recruitment across the region equally to try to get a diverse workforce and try to get the best people we can get.
I'm going to shift questions. So Metro is selling or leaving the Jackson Graham building.
Mm-hmm.
It's a joint development. Are you still keeping an ownership, but you're moving out?
Yes, we're keeping it. It'll be a ground lease.
So it'll actually become an income stream.
Yes,
And your new headquarters will be at L'Enfant Plaza.
yes.
A year ago, it was announced there would be something at New Carrollton. Was that the earlier idea and you gave up on it?
No, what we've done, no, sir, what we've done is we've consolidated over 10 properties that we had where we had people either where we owned or a lot of them we were leasing. And we're creating 3 facilities, one at L'Enfant, one in New Carrollton, and one in Eisenhower in Virginia. So basically it's combining all those resources, which actually saves us tens of millions. I don't have the exact figure in my head over obviously the life of these buildings, but it was designed basically to consolidate, to be more efficient, and also to reduce all these lease payments that we were making and other properties that we had. And the Jackson Graham building was, as I know you've been there, literally did not even meet basic safety standards and ADA standards. So we had to get out of that building. That building, I'm the son of a firefighter, and the minute I walked in that building, it was unacceptable. There's no fire suppression system in the ceiling. So that is unacceptable.
Okay, and I'm a little bit confused. So the headquarters will be at L'Enfant Plaza, but your PowerPoint says 7th Street. It also says 7th Street Southeast, which I assume means southwest. But
Yes.
7th Street is near L'Enfant Plaza. So is it at the plaza or is it near it?
It's right there. It's right at the D. Is it the D Street entrance right there? Right behind the VRE, the rail lines on one side of the building. I guess is that the HUD building that's sort of catty corner to us there?
Yeah.
Yeah, right there. It's from the 1960s, hadn't been touched, that time. We're adding 3 floors to it. We will basically be leasing those floors out as another revenue stream as well. So, we're trying to be very aggressive and trying to help that part of the district as well.
Okay. I know that Councilmember Louis George touched on some of this, but I want to touch on it more generally. A lot of testimony about cuts to bus service. And in fact, I believe in January, you informed the board that, and it might actually have been earlier, that you were consolidating 65 routes into 45, 64 routes into 45. With the latest federal funding, is all that now gone, and you're going to continue with the service you've had in the current fiscal year?
Yes, it'll be the service that we have in the current fiscal year, which we are actually adding some service on the bus side starting this spring. We just started some this week. We will do some more in June, and then obviously we're preparing for full schools coming back in September.
So the testimony we got, like the 62 and 63, that's going to, I don't know how I want to put this. That's gone by the wayside.
My recommendation to the board is that basically the service cuts that we propose due to the lack of fund be brought back in, that those services be brought back in. As you recall, there were a number of rail stations closings, for instance, earlier hours. All that we would recommend that not be done.
Now, there was also testimony about, in fact, it was the first public witness, Shannon Hodge from the Charter Alliance, asked that WMATA reach out to and work with school leaders. Are there those kinds of conversations taking place?
Yes, there are. And obviously, as schools start to come back, there'll be more of those. But yes, we have reached out and have communications.
Okay. Do you know exactly how much money you're getting from the the most recent federal legislation, or is the federal government still calculating that?
It's estimated that the region will get 1.4 billion. But just so you know, that means, for instance, the MTA, the transit agency in Baltimore gets some of that money because they run the MARC train into the region, they run commuter buses into the region. So all that has to be distributed, and then the different local entities get some of those dollars. So that all has to be worked out yet. But the big was 1.4.
So you don't know the actual dollars you're going to get. When do you think you'll know?
Obviously by April for the budget in 2 weeks.
Okay. Let me see. I have 44 seconds left. I think I will turn to Councilmember Lewis George, and I'll have another round of questions. So, Councilmember Lewis George.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. So I wanted to on my previous point just regarding the cap 3% growth over previous years, and that questions regarding subsidies. Did the district request a reduction in their 3% operating subsidies?
Not that I remember officially.
Okay.
But there was a general, you remember this budget is now, when we developed as, 5 months old. And so at that time, we were all under tremendous pressure.
Yeah.
And so I was hearing from everyone that they were under tremendous pressure.
Yeah. I know, and you spoke about this earlier, and WMATA published its zero emissions bus update report late last year. The report obviously calls for a pilot program of 14 electric buses servicing routes across the DMV. And I know many other jurisdictions around the capital region are also exploring the bus fleet conversions. What precautions are being taken to ensure that bus fleet maintenance work is kept in-house and done by WMATA workers instead of the companies that sell the buses? And what training programs will be offered to existing diesel mechanics to allow them to continue their career in bus fleet maintenance?
Again, we've worked very closely with the head of the unions to basically do that. There's a program that we were about to enter into, but obviously, given some other things we've been focusing on, meaning both of us from the COVID side. But there are some training programs. There's a large one up in Silver Spring on bus mechanics. So we are exploring like a joint effort to do that with the union. But so that's the goal, and we've done that. We had explored. In effect, outsourcing one of our facilities. We did it in Virginia called Cinderbed. We're bringing that back in December. So, that's what we'll continue to do.
Okay. Yeah, and I just think that point is so important, because when we talk about transit equity and environmental justice issues, as we grow as a city and as a country to meet our goals, we have to make sure that we are continuing to create green jobs, especially for a critical workforce that has been a part of, transit and transportation. So they should continue to be able to get the training they need to be able to continue the work that they're doing. And so I'm happy to hear that you're working closely with the head of the unions to do this. And I look forward to hearing more about, how you are working, even to Chairman Mendelson's point, to create more jobs for district residents in that space. I want to wrap up on a previous question on the Northern Bus Barn, and I do look forward to speaking further about it. Can you commit that the Northern Bus Garage won't be delayed or at the end of the line in receiving electric buses due to the timing of these renovations that are prioritizing diesel?
Yeah, there's no reason for me not to get them there as quickly as possible. If that's the way that, this all plays out, there's no reason not to go there versus any other place.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I'm happy to hear that you explained to the chairman just with the cuts. I wrote to the WMATA board to express my opposition to the broad service reductions initially proposed in the WMATA budget, particularly in Ward 4. I wanted to understand, though, in the situation that this comes up again, can you share more about kind of how these decisions for the initial budget were made, like specifically in considering equity? How do you incorporate, I guess, residents' access to alternative transportation options or access to cars? Mm-hmm. You heard Commissioner Renee Bowser speak to Ward 4. We had one of the highest rates of COVID consistently, and we probably still have the highest number consistently right now in the city. And that's due to a number of things, but one of that is, the options for many of our residents to get to and from work from an equity standpoint. So how do you incorporate residents' access to that in your decisions, and how do you include equity in that space?
Yeah, so region-wide, what we looked at is we had real data on what people were using during the pandemic. So that's where we tried to protect that. We were monitoring the usage, and where we could, we actually increased some service even with the cuts, because we were being, there was so much demand, and with social distancing, we were trying to meet that. So that drove some of, as you try to do that, something's got to give somewhere else. So that was part of it. The other part is that we looked at things like availability of cars. We also looked at destinations. So some destinations just weren't, they just weren't where they were, whether it was some of the colleges, whether it was some of the malls, those types of things. And then where it was, but there were things like hospitals and things where there were the basic areas that needed to be served. That's what we tried to do as best we could, again, with this very large scale operation. But that's really what we did. But we really did look a lot at what we saw, real time with what people where they were using the system. Not where we want to be with the system, but literally where we were having people come and using our system, and literally the demand on that. So that's what we tried to do, is preserve that and improve that where we could.
Yeah. I'm interested to know, what are your thoughts and planning about whether individuals will continue to prefer bus access, train access in the months or years to come due to smaller crowds and potentially less risk of viral spread? Is that something you have studied or have projections about?
It's something that the entire industry is wrestling with. I mean, the same question came up earlier about commercial real estate, right? With Mr. Bean. I personally take a very positive outlook towards transit in the future. I think we've learned a lot, good and bad, with this. I'm not sure going back and being, stuck in traffic is where people want to be after the way they've lived for the last, several months, how they've adjusted their own lives. I think that the peak versus non-peak shift may occur, where people, it won't be the normal, 7 to 9, but there may be other times where people want to use transit, and where we can do a much better job in serving a much broader array of travel needs versus just the person that comes into an office, which we've seen, they don't have to do that as much because they can telework. Whereas the other people that don't have that option, they need to move all day. And I think people that do have the options want to move all day. So I know there's a number of transit properties around the country that are starting to think that way, is how do we rethink what we provide, not just go back to what we did before.
Yeah. Do you specifically think riders might prefer buses to Metro given the smaller crowds? Has WMATA studied or projected the shift from Metro rail to bus? We have, to some degree, we do a lot of surveys and focus groups, and it's complicated, the response we're getting from people. If you have options and you're not getting on a bus or rail, other people that maybe don't have options, they may have a different view, right, of which mode they would use. We haven't seen that much of that. People that basically don't have the option, meaning the option to telework, they want to get there the best they can. And we haven't seen a big distinction that they feel more comfortable in a bus versus rail due to social distancing and that. We haven't seen that. I think with the vaccine, I think that will go further and further down. We've seen ridership start to improve on both. So I think that will come back. Okay. And, I want to offer my condolences again to the employees that you've lost during COVID, and obviously sending our condolences to their families and your staff as well. Can you please describe, I guess, the current safety measures put in place, given this risk, put in place to protect both employees and riders from contracting COVID-19 in the WMATA system, and especially how you expect these measures may evolve through the rest of 2021 as we move toward, a greater reopening?
Sure. Well, some of the things, let me just start on the bus. We went with rear door boarding. in effect to reduce the exposure at the front of the bus to the operator. We have shields on the buses for the operators to protect them that way. We are looking at potential rear door boarding, where when we actually could collect fares there, again, to try to distribute that. We basically been giving the operators the ability to monitor the use of the system. Basically, we're trying to keep it at roughly 20 people per bus. Again, certain points that's not realistic because people want to get on because they want to get to where they need to get to. And we try to provide more buses there when we can. The same way with rail. And then obviously all the cleaning we do cleaning, we do proactive cleaning constantly. And then if we have any situations where someone has either identified, particularly this is a work site issue, if someone says they've been exposed or they've been contacted, then we go in and clean where that person is. We do our own contact tracing of our employees. We have a whole portal set up on our website where we monitor. Literally, we ask everyone to put in any exposures they've had, any quarantine. That's how we've been doing that, and that's how we're also doing the vaccine, so that we know. Again, we cannot demand that someone take the vaccine, but if you get it, it puts us in a much better position to monitor it and to keep everyone safe. So that's what we've been doing there. Same way with the public. Again, we're trying to do that. We have masks now on every bus. We have dispensers on every bus. We have dispensers at the rail stations, and disinfecting and cleaning.
Awesome. Thank you,
Thank
Matt.
you, Councilmember Henderson for 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Mendelson. Good afternoon, and apologies, I'm just popping in. A couple of other hearings going on today, and my colleagues have seemed to cover most of my questions. It's good to hear that you are going to be making a recommendation to not go through with any of the proposed cuts due to the additional aid that we're getting from the federal government. And I thank you for that move. I think that was going to cause a lot of angst. And frankly, some heartache for residents in certain parts of our city where they rely on bus and don't have many other opportunities for other modes of transportation. So I'm projecting that the board will receive your recommendation in a very good light. I wanted to just ask a couple of questions about Metro Transit Police. I think oftentimes in our conversations around policing, particularly in the district, there's a lot of focus in terms of MPD. But I know, especially when it comes to our young people who are now going to be going back to school and now are going to having more interactions on Metro rail and bus, that they're going to have but more increased interactions with Metro Transit Police, which sometimes those interactions haven't been very positive in the past. I noted in your response to the pre-hearing questions that while the Metro Transit Police Department leadership reviews and tracks officers' use of force, stop and frisk, and arrest, the agency does not report to the public on the use of force or stops and frisk. I'm curious, does that data get up to you?
It does. I believe Chief Pavlik's on the call as well. He can weigh in as well. Yes, I mean, things they come to me if there's anything that obviously if there's anything urgent, but we do in effect like a police stat meeting where basically all that data is presented and is presented to the executive team, members of the executive team. So it's not just in the police department. So that's where we can see, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why is this doing this? That, whatever, across the board. So that is the mechanism that we use to make sure that there's some sort of outside view, not just inside the police department on issues. Okay.
How often do you guys do police stats?
They do monthly. It's been a little different, as you can imagine, with the COVID. Right. We still do that, but literally I would personally attend, and a number of other people would personally attend outside of the police department in those meetings. And that's where literally everything from a sergeant on up gives reports out on incidents.
Okay. Chief Pavlik, thank you for joining us. I'm curious, when you all track the data internally, is it tracked by age and race of the individual?
Chief Pavlik, are you on?
Yes, good evening, sir, and Councilmember Henderson. Yes, so anytime an officer is required to use a force or uses force, not only do we document it in an official police report, but they're also required to complete a separate use of force form that spells out the type of force they used. We track all use of force reports, the demographics of the individual stop, as well as the demographics of the officer.
Okay, I had this, what's today? Today's Monday. Okay, so last week we were talking to Chief Conti from MPD, and he and I were in a conversation around whether or not there are different guidelines or different procedures when involving minors in the situation. I'm curious for you all, do you have a different set of procedures for how you deal with adults versus how you deal with minors when you come into contact with them?
Yes.
Okay. Is any of that information public, or just in terms of the guidelines and processes?
Yeah, so basically we follow the jurisdictional code. So in Maryland, we follow Maryland procedures, in the district, and in Virginia, Virginia's. We just started posting numerous of our policies online as one of the initiatives that the DC Council wanted us to do.
Okay. Wow. I think that probably is very difficult for some of your officers to keep track of the policies and procedures across the 3 jurisdictions. Does the new Metro Transit Police Department Investigations Review Panel also have access to such data when it reviews cases as well?
They do.
Okay, great. I understand that, this new board was created in June. It's fully staffed and up and running. Everything moving smoothly?
It is. So we spent the latter part of last year training the panel up, so to speak. So we brought them in several times and conducted virtual training with them on our policies, general orders, our collective bargaining agreement. And then they kicked off their first official meeting in January, and they've met again. So they're meeting basically monthly, and then they'll provide quarterly updates to our board of directors.
Okay, so their meetings aren't public?
No.
Okay. So I think in December, the council passed legislation to create a larger civilian-led complaint review board, but Maryland and Virginia haven't passed their own particular measures for that to go into effect. Do you have any idea whether or not those jurisdictions plan to do so?
I don't know, Ms. Henderson, that'd be premature of me, but one thing I would say is I think, DC Council needs to give an opportunity for the board, that our board of directors, the panel that our board put together, an opportunity to work. We're only about 90 days into this new panel, so I think it'd be premature to say whether it's successful or not, but we probably would need a year to determine whether or not the panel that our board put together, that's made up of residents or constituents across Maryland, DC, and Virginia, to see how effective they are.
Okay. Well, for the new board that WMATA put in place, will they do like quarterly reporting or report out? I'm just trying to understand in terms of like, how does the public get to know what they're doing if their meetings aren't public?
So the makeup of them is decided by our board of directors. So they represent Maryland, DC, and Virginia, and then they report quarterly through our board of directors with any recommendations, findings they have, et cetera. And it's all spelled out in a charter that we have, our MOU, between the panel and our board of directors. Okay,
great. Thank you so much, Chief Pavlik, for being on. I wanted to turn just in my last little minutes here to talk about post-pandemic planning. Director, I found it really interesting that the ridership, bus ridership is exceeding, for FY21 is exceeding its projections. And I think that might have something to do with just the fact in terms of in parts of the city where they are very public transit or bus dependent, we have a lot of essential workers who are working in those areas. But I've always been one of those who thought that kind of imbalance in terms of how we did our capital investments versus bus versus rail, especially when I think that we do have a lot of residents who are committed to the bus and would certainly use it more if we had more things like bus lanes and faster traffic flows and things like that. Are you all looking at this data from the pandemic to draw any, conclusions, but to rethink how we have thought about, the role that bus is playing, particularly in the district?
Yes, in fact, we have underway the bus transformation effort. You may be familiar with that. It started with an outside group last year, and now we're working with all the local entities to say, okay, now, what does that new network look like? Where that gets into that. So I think the information that we're learning now over the last few months is huge in that, particularly as we focus more on the transit equity part of it, of the equation. So I think all that's in the mix now, and it's something that both Maryland, Virginia, and the district have an interest in.
Okay, that's great to hear. I'm also thinking in terms of not so far down the line, but like, let's say more or less where we might be in the summer in terms of more people returning to their office buildings and the upticks there. How quickly are you all able to like turn it on to increase the amount of trains and buses that are running so that one, there is not significant overcrowding, but two, residents are not waiting a significant amount of time between vehicle?
Yeah, fairly quickly. I mean, it's much easier to add than go through the process of reducing, obviously. Right. But remember, we have a workforce of 8,000 people that have made their they literally pick where they're going to be working. They made their own personal decisions and their own life choices. Right, they're dealing with their own issues. So we have to give them time to do that. We have to create the schedules and all that. So generally, that's in 3-month type period. But we're going to be on. This is the last year. Literally, we've been adjusting on the fly almost a month to month on a lot of issues, on the budget issues, on the service issues. So we're not in the typical budgeting cycle. I mean, we are, but we aren't. We recognize that we're going to have to keep coming back and looking at this budget at a quarterly basis at a minimum. We're basically going to, if we see things going one way or it goes the other way, we need to be able to do that. So we've shown the flexibility to do that through, for the last 9 months. So I would anticipate, we're all hoping that that's the challenge that we face, is that we have this great demand and we're coming out there with more and more to deal with it.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll have one more 5-minute round. And I'm going to begin with some questions for Mr. Charrington. For the district government, the Inspector General is responsible for our CAFR. Are you do you do the contract for the CAFR? And even if you don't, did the CAFR come out on time for Metro?
Are you talking about the independent financial statement audits or?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, sir, we are. We manage the contract with an outside firm, and the outside firm with our supervision conducts the financial statement audits every year.
And was it on time?
Yes, sir, it was.
And were there any material weaknesses?
No, sir.
Any significant deficiencies?
No, sir.
How do you work with local compact jurisdictions? For instance, do you have a relationship with the district's Attorney General or Inspector General or similar agencies? Do you coordinate your work on investigations with the local compact jurisdictions? I don't mean always. Do you ever coordinate? If there are occasions where you refer allegations to district officials if wrongdoing is found that violates district law?
Sure. First of all, in coordination, yes, we coordinate and work jointly with the DCIG, the federal OIGs, and other both transit and local jurisdictional IGs, both around the country and regionally, including the BAIG. As far as investigations go, depending on the investigations, we do refer them to the United States Attorney's Office for prosecution, also to state's attorneys, county prosecutors, and we do coordinate with the attorneys general in all 3 of the jurisdictions, depending on the case. I'm sorry, I thought you had another question. So yes, we do coordinate them for civil and criminal cases and administrative cases. Then, of course, we're members of the Association of IGs. We benchmark ideas and, of course, our rules, regulations, everything that are governed sort of by the larger federal and Association of IGs. So yes, sir, we do coordinate.
Thank you. Ms. Samara Singh, you were the Chief Operating Officer. Now you are the Acting Chief Executive Officer. Can you explain, is there a vacancy? What's happening?
That's correct, Chair Mendelson. I am the current Acting Chief Executive Officer. Unfortunately, our current David Meyer, who is our Chief Executive Officer, had to take a leave of absence suddenly a few weeks ago. in the middle of February. And we are hoping that he will return quickly. But until such time, I am the acting Chief Executive Officer. But I do fulfill my Chief Operating Officer role concurrently as well.
So you're wearing two hats, and it's temporary, the CEO, being acting CEO.
That's correct, Chair Mendelson.
Generally, how could WMATA be better about safety concerns?
So since we have been the State Safety Oversight Agency for WMATA's Metro Rail system, our focus has shifted throughout the last 2 years, depending on the various investigations and the ongoing concerns that are raised either through the employees and the passengers who use the system, or our own monitoring efforts. In terms of how Metro can do better in terms of safety concerns, from day to day, that answer would change, especially given the fact that there are things that Metro does do very well, and there are areas that our focus and our monitoring has presented us evidence that Metro can do better. In terms of doing better at safety concerns, conducting better training of personnel, our focus on the Rail Operations Control Center have been both areas where we feel that Metro can do better. And of course, as you have probably heard, when we issued the audit concerning the Rail Operations Control Center, the 25 findings that we presented were taken to heart by Metro, and they have been actively working to address those concerns. The Rail Operations Control Center is a microcosm of Metro Rail. So not only is there a focus on rail operations, but there are a whole host of issues that Metro is learning as a result of the corrections that they are putting into place at the Rail Operations Control Center. So in terms of addressing safety concerns, there are things that they are working on actively based on the feedback and the findings that we provide, and they do their own monitoring work to do things better as well. I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I'm going to move quickly to one other question, and that is, it's actually two questions. Why can't the Safety Commission designate a single point of contact for materials and document requests, and also work on coordination of audits? For example, there was a FTA did a drug and alcohol program audit, and then within months, Safety Commission did a fitness for duty audit, which overlapped, putting the agency through basically the same exercise twice. Coordination of audits and designating a single point of contact for materials and document requests.
Sure, and I will answer the two questions separately. On the one hand, in terms of the question that you raised as a single point of contact, that is not how state safety oversight agencies conduct the work. The approach is considered valuable to engage at all levels of Metro Rail departments within the entire Metro Rail agency. And so utilizing a single point of contact doesn't really fulfill the charge and the mission that we are entrusted with in ensuring that we are overseeing the entirety of the Metro Rail system, including operations, including inspections, including design of vehicles, personnel, track and structures, signal systems, and so forth. So we engage directly with the individuals within WMATA who have the expertise to conduct the work and provide us answers on the specific concerns that we raise on those disciplines. So
my question was not about interviews. My question was about for materials and document requests.
Yes, and so that is not the way that we conduct our work. We conduct it in a decentralized manner, which is exactly why the FTA transitioned over to us in that manner. They wanted us to continue the work in a decentralized approach. And as a matter of fact, Metro's own agency safety plan commits to a decentralized approach in conducting the work. So we cannot concentrate our efforts into a single point of contact because our work is conducted on a day-to-day basis. As a matter of fact, during the 1 hour that I have been on this session, there would have been at least a dozen interactions between our staff and Metro Rail staff at the various departments within Metro Rail. So that is why we cannot focus on a single point of interaction.
Coordination of audits, and I'm over my time.
Coordination of audits is primarily focused through the Quality and Internal Compliance Department, QICO, because they have the ability to receive our requests and send that out throughout the Metro Rail system, especially because these audits are scheduled years in advance. And so there's a better ability to coordinate that work in a more timely manner. Whereas in the instance of investigations and inspections and the more immediate requests that we receive and we present to Metro, those are conducted on a case-by-case basis at the various levels of Metro Rail between frontline personnel, middle management, and as well as management and executive leadership. So it's a combination of tactics that we use depending on how immediately we need the information versus whether it's something that we can plan for months ahead.
I have to say I'm not satisfied with the answers, but Councilmember Lewis George.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councilmember Henderson covered most of my questions regarding the Metro Transit Police. That was going to be the next session I go through. So, I want to just take a moment to just say, this is a time, to deepen our commitment to mass transit so we can ensure that Metro Bus and Metro Rail are a key component of the long-term future for our region. And I think despite the obstacles we face with COVID-19, I believe that WMATA can finalize a budget that does right by its riders, our transit workers, our communities, and our climate at the same time. And so, I encourage you by all costs to protect and expand the public transit services that I think fuel our region's economy and link our communities together, and that you continue to put workers first and continue to make sure that DC employees have an ability to be a part of this region's economy through the transit program. And I look forward to discussing the WMATA Bus Barn project with you further and the need to electrify our bus fleet and pursue a more environmentally sustainable approach. And I look forward to a productive working relationship with you all and appreciate your consideration. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I believe Councilmember Henderson has left. So that's going to conclude this hearing. Mr. Wiedefeld, I hope somebody took notes so that you know what you said you would get back to us on.
Yes, sir, I did.
I appreciate that. I want to thank all of you, meaning the witnesses. With that, this hearing is going to be adjourned. Let me just say that this has been, I believe, the fourth of 6 oversight hearings that the Committee of the Whole is having. And the next one will be Wednesday at noon on the Commission on Arts and Humanities in the University of the District of Columbia. The time is now 5:54 in the afternoon, and this hearing